Hey, yo, lesson here, babe. You come at the king, you best not miss.
I am not here to debate with anyone. I only debate with my equals. All others I teach.
As it has been said before, and I repeat as often as I can, using the great John Henrik Clarke's quote, I only debate with my equals, all others I teach. And every time one of you so-called millennial scholars that don't read, can't pick up a book, can't put two thoughts together, come at me with this half thought off, half baked theories that you have. And all of a sudden you get rejected and slapped down. You're trying to pretend that you're something that you're not. What you see on YouTube, that is me, that is me. This is what I do. This is what I am. This is what I have been doing for quite a long time. This is probably what I've been doing since I was a little kid, as my mother tells me. Big J, you are not that. No matter how much bluster, how much cussing you do, how much beefing you do, which is you're probably better at beefing than you are at analyzing or debating or reading or researching. You don't do any of that. What you do is call people Negroes. You call names because that's all that you can do. So at calling me out to debate me, which you haven't because you've never stepped onto the field of battle. Now, I have been in your circle several times and you have not acquitted yourself. In fact, you've made a fool of yourself. So much so that most of my subs ask me to stop picking on you. God protects babies and fools, and so do my subs. But yet, you haven't figured out yet that you are inadequate. You're inadequate to approach me. You're inadequate to debate me. And you're certainly inadequate to teach me. And you're too dumb to accept the lessons that I give. What I present didn't come out of nowhere. It's called 25 years of very hard work for no pay. Researching for black people is not profitable. Entertaining black folks is, but researching for them, teaching black folks is not profitable. Black folks, and you in particular, don't respect wisdom or knowledge, which is unfortunate. But let this be my last address to you because you're wasting my fucking time. Which is all that you're doing, is wasting my time. Now, what you present as far as civilization's done, I did that work 5 or 6 years ago. In fact, I made presentations to it over 5 years ago. My very first YouTube video was on this because some people asked me to do it because I was talking about it on internet radio, and somebody asked me, why don't you formally put it up so people can actually see it and people can actually study it? Because most people cannot and do not understand it. Civilizations are complex. So complex that a certain expert in civilizations, Carol Quigley, was paid by the Council of Foreign Relations to do a 5-year study on Western civilization, which he did. He presented that book in Tragedy Hope, which they proceeded to bury so that no one else would actually see it or see the light of day. Now, since I've done the work already, and I do not feel like going back over it again, especially for someone of the likes of you, I will actually present the work here so that you can peruse it, then hopefully you can understand it because this work is accurate because it's 5 years ago. And from 5 years to the date, this is exactly what we're seeing right now. So what I presented was accurate. It's so accurate, it's happening right now. Chinese have already taken over the civilization. The civilization has not died. It's not going to be destroyed. Don't let white people fool you. They're trying to tell you the civilization is going to be destroyed. It is not. The thing is, they won't be in charge of it. So to them, their civilization is gone because they're not in charge of their own civilization. They have to take a back seat, which is something they do not like. It is what it is. But For lunkheads like you, I'm going to send you to the back of the class, put the dunce cap on your head, and have you observe this. And hopefully, after observing this, you can understand. Because, son, you're out of my class. You're not worthy to step onto the battlefield against me. And every time one of you Jaspers actually do, I get accused of picking on you. So, with that, I'm going to present this. I'm going to be back on the other side. And this is going to be the last time I address you because you are wasting my time. So I'm not going to answer you anymore. You can make up 100 BGS videos. I'm not going to answer you anymore. You're wasting my time. I got videos backing up. I got series I have to do. I have book studies I have to do. And it's piling up. And you knuckleheads that don't know shit from Shinola are wasting my time. If you don't like me, you don't like what I do, you don't like what I present, please go away. In fact, I'd advise all you folks that don't like me, don't like what I do. There's GK Sigma, there's Kid Organic, there's BigJXXX, there's City of Truth 91. Go over to their channels and actually both of their channels. They need the money, they need the subs. Go over there. If you think that what I present is not valuable and you think they're better, go over there and present them, because I'm not beefing with them anymore. I don't have time to beef with them anymore. I am too old. I don't have any days left that are promised to me. Every day is precious, and you knuckleheads are wasting my time. Either bring something that's valuable, bring something that's cogent, bring something that's groundbreaking, or get the fuck out of my face and leave me alone. I'm going to present this, and I'm going to be back on the other side. Okay, folks. This is the corollary chart for Tragedy and Hope. We're going to call this Quigley's Dilemma because it is the centerpiece of why he named the book Tragedy and Hope. He said it was a tragedy that he thought Western civilization or Western culture was going to go down the tubes, and he had hoped that this book, the study of this book, could find a method or a way out to where it could be extended. But we're gonna in this chart we're gonna show you why. Okay, if you've listened to the parts thus far, you know that there's a cycle of civilization, and we have the various tracks. We have the various tracks up here. Now, the normal cycle of civilization goes from mixture gestation to expansion, crisis or age of conflict, to the universal empire. Then after that, it decay, and then invasion becomes material for the next civilization. Okay, we're going to, so Quigley goes through the Western civilization cycle. Okay, the first part was mixture under Rome. After Rome fell in 377, or between 377 and 350 to the Visigoths, it broke down and became pieces or material for the next civilization. So these elements came together, like the gang plow, the three-field system, the mounted horse, the mounted warriors that the Visigoths and the others brought in, a different way of fighting and growing food, and plus the material and the technology that Rome had brought in. So we had a mixture under the fall of Rome. Then it gestated into a feudal manor system right here. Feudal states. Gestated into feudal states, which expanded. The feudal states expanded under, under feudalism. These feudal states, because they were successful, a successful way of growing food and protecting themselves, the idea and the power started to expand. They started to incorporate more and more people and more land. Then after that, after it reached a certain peak where it couldn't expand anymore, the idea couldn't expand anymore, they started fighting to, the different groups, the different feudal states started fighting for dominance. They fought for dominance, which is called the First 100 Years' War, which is basically fought from this age of conflict from 1270 to 1440, and it finally, the 100 Years' War finally ended by being conquered, or most of it being conquered, under England. Now, normally, it would follow this track right here, but it didn't. Feudalism was supplanted by what quickly calls commercial capitalism or mercantilism. So it found, the Western civilization found a new principle to expand under mercantilism, and it started it delayed this process and started this process all over again. Okay, it expanded and from the Mediterranean all the way up, the East Indian companies with Great Britain and the Dutch and whatnot, the Spanish, conquistadors. They expanded all over the globe, and it found a new principle to expand under. Then, as that died out, or that lost energy, again, they started fighting over the pieces. They started fighting for dominance because of the idea of lack. They couldn't expand anymore. And that became, guess what? The Second 100 Years' War, or the Second Age of Conflict. And that finally ended when during the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon conquered the West, or conquered the core of the Western civilization. Okay, again, another principle, another ism supplanted that, and that was industrialism, or industrial capital. The Industrial Revolution happened, started in England, and it spread to America and all over. So guess what? It started to expand again, and it supplanted the Age of Conflict, and it kept France from being the universal empire. It started a new cycle under industrialism, led by the United States and Germany. So then again, it as always, it loses steam. It stops expanding, and you're going to get a third age of conflict, this time even bigger, because industrial capitalism or industrialism brought in mechanized warfare, and the people that were best at it were the Germans. And Germany fought four wars and 2 world wars, 2 of them world wars, and they finally they conquered the whole of the core in 1942. And in this time, it took an outside force, which was the United States, and its twin brother, which was the Soviet Union, to come in and supplant Germany from becoming the Universal Empire. Now this brings now this was Quigley's dilemma. Would there be another principle or another age for age of expansion, a principle for the age of expansion to continue, or would it stop? Now, he said there was two possibilities. Possibility one was that the United States would which had defeated Germany in World War II and brought in Bretton Woods, would become the sole superpower and become the Universal Empire, and they would rule for however long the civilization would last. And eventually, when the United States lost power, it would get decay at the edges, and then Western civilization would become material for somebody else, China, Russia, whoever. The second option, and this is the option that I think is happening, and you can guess and see if that's wrong, is what we call where we're into now, which is the digital revolution, when computers and electronics came about. You're going to have if we're correct, we have a fourth age of expansion, and what we could be right now, since right now in the 21st century is the fourth age of conflict, not necessarily warfare. Hopefully it won't get to that, where the United States is the sole superpower and they're the core empire. They've defeated everybody else, or just about everybody else, in the core empire, but they're also decaying, and China is rising. Now, could China be the final step, the Universal Empire, and finally complete the cycle? Where Western civilization will die within the next 100, 150 years, or could be more, we don't know. But that is Quigley's dilemma. So I thought I'd draw this flow chart because it confused me in the book. I thought it would confuse everybody else. So this is what I came up with. Leave me comments or in the box and tell me what you think. If you remember back to the corollary I did on tragedy and hope, which was Quigley's dilemma, I'm going to do this is a part 2. And like I said, I like to give real world examples of Quigley's theory and how it applies to our real world. If you just to review for a second, but you can also go back and check out the vid. Civilizations have a cycle, a 7-step cycle, all the way from mixture going down to decay and invasion. Okay, and we figured that we've gone through this, and we're somewhere here, and we didn't know which path that it would take. Quigley at the time didn't know which path it would take, whether the United States would become the Universal Empire and rule for however long it was going to rule, and then decay and become fodder for the next civilization, or the cycle would continue, and we'd have a fourth expansion, with the United States being the core empire that rules for a short time over the rest of the civilization, and then somebody else becoming the Universal Empire.
which is what he was afraid of, that somebody else would in the fringe would become the universal empire and they would rule, and then until the end of the civilization. And it looks like there's a possibility that this is the track. This is the track that we may have that we may be taking right here. Why? Because the United States did defeat the Soviet Empire and became the sole superpower. That it did. Now, it could have gone into this after, in 1989. It could have gone into this, become the sole superpower and ruled, and we would in the civilization would have started to decay. But instead, we may have gone into what I call the fourth expansion, and the digital revolution. And under the digital revolution, where the civilization expanded its final expansion out to the whole entire globe, it looks like the fringe element, which he may have predicted, which is Chinese, which we'll get into that later, why he figured there would be Asian pressure and would rival the rest of the world. It looks like the Chinese actually may be the universal empire. It could be. We don't know. But we're going to give you a real world example on why that may be so. If you remember your United States history about the Monroe Doctrine, the Latin America or South America is our backyard, our playground. And our shining achievement in Latin America, South America, is the Panama Canal, which we took over from the French and we built and maintained for, I would say, about 100 years. We maintained it, and we, in 1999, it went back to the people of Panama, the Panamanian citizens. And it looks like, I'm going to play you a clip. It looks like the Chinese have bought out the canal from the Panamanians, and they now control it, which is totally against what the principles of the United States have been for the last 100 years. For a foreign power to come in and actually take over Latin America or South America and become the dominant power. Now I'm going to play the clip, and I'm going to leave that up to you for you to decide whether that is true or that is not true. A lot of people believe that the United States will never be defeated. So it still may not have been, but we owe the Chinese a lot of money, and that could have been a concession. Okay, we can't pay you back, but we can give you control of the canal. We can give you land, which is something the great powers have been doing throughout history. They have, when they couldn't pay their debts, they give land, or they give control of colonies. And this may be the case. So I'm going to boot up the clip so you can listen to it, and we'll see.
So anyway, when I left the airport and finally ran into one of my expat buddies living down there in Panama for many years, and I asked him, what's with all the damn security? It's worse than the U.S. And then he told me at first the Panama government announced that it was about tracking narco money and unpaid tax dollars, basically to root out money laundering. But then he winked and said, the rumor has it is that the government and the Chinese are worried that terrorists might sabotage the Panama Canal. After all, it would just take one small bomb to put that thing out of commission for weeks. And that's where the Panamanian government makes most of its revenue, charging hefty fees and taxes for ships going through the locks. And he said, the Panamanian government didn't pay the mega millions for that scanning equipment at the airport. The Chinese did. And that's because the Chinese government has bought up virtually all the land and concessions up and down the Panama Canal since the U.S. had to turn it back over to them on December 31st, 1999. And the Chinese, being communists and ever so sneaky and cautious, they're taking every security measure possible to make sure their canal, yes, it is their canal now, remains wide open to traffic. They don't get the tax or transit money that goes through the canal, but they earn billions a year off of storage, freight loading, and sorting concessions. And since no country in the world is really in love with the Chinese, they figure in the future, if diplomacy goes sour, the canal would be an easy target. And it would be. Oh, and by the way, certain other rich Chinese businessmen are not happy that a certain group of Chinese owns the Panama Canal now. So a second group of Chinese businessmen pulled out their checkbooks and they made the Nicaraguan cabinet and most of the congressmen millionaires so that they'd vote a 50-year concession to these Chinese guys to build a canal through Nicaragua. A project that'll take 11 years and cost 50 billion bucks. Or is it 50 billion won? In any event, chicken feet to the Chinese. And what you might not know is that 50-year concession in Nicaragua is owned by a gigantic Chinese telecom group that's not affiliated with the government. But who knows? The Chinese aren't transparent about such things. In fact, they're not transparent about anything. So here's the problem. You go to Panama, they've got your fingerprints, maybe an iris scan, and they've got your photo. And remember, all Panama banks have signed the FATCA agreement, so they're reporting all your personal data back to the IRS. That is, if you've used your own name on a personal bank account, SA corporation, or trust. So talk about an information gathering apparatus. Well, that's what they've got in Panama, so beware. And I, for one, am not going back. And that's, of course, because all that stuff from China is coming on a daily basis through the canal, which also means you can get every product known to man in Panama. Again, because everything comes through the canal. So you're going to get great deals on all the Chinese stuff that's coming through, but there's no deals at all on anything made in the U.S. That is, if you can think of anything that's made in the U.S. Anyway, you won't get any deals on products made in Europe or Latin America either. Even when places are having huge sales, you'll pay first world U.S. prices and more. And speaking of made in China, while sitting in a hotel and flicking through the TV channels, I just had to check out what was on the local Chinese channel. And obviously, it was not a channel meant for the average Panameño. Why? Because they had no subtitles in Spanish. And the fact is, for all my years down here, I've never met a single Latin person who could speak Mandarin or any Chinese dialect. And if the Chinese really wanted to commingle with the Latins and let the Latins in on their part of the world, their social and economic world, that is, they would have at least have attempted to put Spanish subtitles on their TV programs now, wouldn't they? But they didn't, and they won't, because you see, that's not part of their plan. In the business world, it's obvious the Chinese are taking over, and it doesn't seem they need or want any help from the locals, the Panamanians. Though, of course, they need the government to get their permits to get started on their businesses. And once they've achieved that, they do everything from the viewpoint of their own ethnic world, the Chinese world. And it seems they're trying to maintain a parallel, separate Chinese-style world at all costs. Very strange, but that's the way they do things. And I witnessed a very good sample of this myself. Now, like I said before, I'm staying in the very high-buck Hard Rock Hotel complex. That place I told you with 62 floors. And I've been here quite a few days now, and I haven't seen one Chinese person in this hotel. And that's because I found out there are certain other four-star hotels down here that are Chinese-owned and operated, where, of course, the Chinese contingent with money stay. Like I said, there's two separate worlds in a very small country, and the Chinese want it that way. But I was talking about that Chinese TV channel down here now, wasn't I? Anyway, I noticed that between the regular Chinese programs, all of the commercials were Chinese too. Chinese banks, Chinese construction companies, Chinese legal and security firms, and even Chinese doctors and medical offices. Then, to top it off, surprise, surprise, there were a group of Chinese beauty parlors sponsoring a Panama National Chinese Beauty Contest. And sorry, all you Latina beauties, it's for Chinese ladies only.
Okay. Now, this is something I presented way back in 2013. As you can see, the graphics aren't the best because I was using it at a lower resolution. Perhaps I will refresh this and complete the book on Patreon if I decide to do so. Kind of backlogged with other projects and other that I probably have to get to first, but we'll see. Now, For you remedial students that can't understand and can't grasp it, I'm going to connect the fucking dots for you. Quigley had a theory called civilizational rotation. Civilization starts, which they call it its core, moves out to its periphery, or what they call the buffer areas, and from the buffer areas to the periphery. So England in the 15th century actually conquered or took over most of Europe and held it until Napoleon came in and actually took over from that. He was defeated by the Germans and the Russians. And then you had an age of conflict back and forth where the Germans fought the French 4 times and finally defeated them in 1942, took over all of Europe until the Americans came in from the outside and the Russians came in from the other side and defeated Germany. We had another age of conflict, which I didn't put in, between Russia and the United States called the Cold War, which I probably need to update my Quigley's Dilemma, called the Cold War, which is another age of conflict from 1945 to 1989, which the United States defeated the Soviet Union. They broke up. George Bush declared the New World Order. United States was a core empire of the global civilization. And that lasted, well, actually, it still lasted up until just recently. But another age of conflict started when the Chinese and the Russians actually got back together in 1995. 1997, another age of conflict, another proxy or Cold War actually opened up in 1997, and that proceeded for the next 20 years until 2017, to where the Chinese declared that they were indeed the perennial power. And the age of conflict that the United States has been fighting with the Chinese and their allies has probably ended with Donald Trump pulling out of Syria, to my estimation. There's other fallout that would go along with that, with Pax Americana that happened from 1945 on, but we'll see how that works out. If you can't connect those dots from what I presented, then your next option probably after this is you will have to pay me. Because BigJXXX, this is probably your last free lesson. Now, if you want to debate me, you want a response from me, then you're going to have to email me. You're going to have to step onto the field of battle and show what you know. Other than that, putting my name in your video, hopefully you get some subscribers from it, because you will get no more attention from me. You will be DTM, dead to me. So asking me, provoking me, being on my channel, if I see you in my hangouts provoking me, and you're not going to come in and debate or converse, then you shall be blocked and you shall be banned. And you can be on the outside looking in like the rest of them. But this is going to be my final lesson to you, my final address to you, because, son, I do not have time for little kids. So you can go where the other ashy blokes are, to wherever you guys go, and do what you did. Go play amongst yourselves. Go to the back of the class or outside the schoolyard and complain about the teacher. With that, that's all I got for you. This is BGS out. And as they say on Star Trek, the Vulcans say, live long and prosper.
They shouldn't have given you ashy blokes YouTube.